Well, thank you all for being here today. Before we get started, I'd like to kind of get a sense of who we have in the room. So if you are here as getting your master's degree, can you raise your hand? Okay, and then PhDs, the rest of you? Any other postdocs or other? Okay, and then how many of you are hoping to do a career in industry or the private sector after graduation? Okay, in academia? Okay, we've got a good mix then. So I will tailor my comments to all of you today. So again, thanks for having me. I'm Rebecca Robinson, as she said. I am with the K-State Institute for Commercialization, which most people haven't heard of. It is, for K-State, the technology transfer organization. So anytime there are new inventive contributions created by faculty members or staff, the university then works to commercialize those endeavors, so patents, copyrights, and other know-how that could have value in order to get it out into and disseminate that information and creation to the people. So I, though, don't actually work in technology transfer. I work for a specific sort of division of our organization focused on economic development. So how can we leverage the assets of Kansas State University to create economic growth regionally? So how can we recruit companies to this region to then partner with the university, employ people either during their academic career or after, and how can they leverage the research, innovation, talent, and training to help their organizations grow quicker, faster, and easier. That's a role that I've been in about almost a decade now, working with K-State, and so I've been through that, this process for about a decade now, but it took quite a bit of networking to get to where I am today and to be successful at what we do today. I started at K-State as a marketing major, graduated with a marketing major and a leadership studies minor and a Spanish minor, and then went on for and did a master's at K-State in business, and now hopefully soon starting a PhD program. So I feel all you in this trek for higher education. One of the things, we talk about the title of this presentation is professional networking, but I think the reality, and what I might do in the future is actually change the title to, because the word networking is such a buzzword about, can you do it? How do you do it well? But the reality is it's all about relationship building and managing. And so how do we become better professional relationship builders? We build relationships every day of our lives, right? With your friends, your family, your colleagues, your mentors, advisors, teachers. But how do we do that in a professional way that allows us to expand opportunities? So today we're going to talk a bit about the whys and the hows. Really, the big why for me and should be for you is that when you think about networking, it's sort of like this iceberg. So the story of the iceberg is, there's about 20% of the iceberg that is above water and 80% of it's below. And what this really can translate to is opportunity. So networking can translate to opportunities, and most of those opportunities are not on a public website for you to go find. So if you talk about, and you can use opportunities or jobs or collaboration, all of those things are something that could be created by getting to know other people professionally better. So in the job market, they say that 30 to 80% of jobs are unpublished. They're never in a newspaper or on a website. And so, and they don't know what that number is because there's no way to track jobs that are created without a job listing. You can replace that word with opportunities. And so a lot of times for the employment base, it's that employers want to, they largely like to hire based on a referral or a recommendation, based on people in their network. So if they're looking to fill a position, they're first probably going to scour their own landscape and say, is there anybody I know that could fill this job that would be good at it that I already know, that I know what I'm going to get. And then if they sort of rack their brains about who they know, and there isn't somebody that they already know that fills in that, they'll reach out to other people and say, hey, I'm hiring. Do you know of anyone that would be good for this position? And then if that doesn't work, it might be a listing. And so as you're thinking about opportunities, the same might be true of a research collaboration or some other type of engagement, that it's bumping into people at the right time in the right place. And so those, for instance, all of the people that I've hired in my own organization have been hired based on referrals or people that I've met. I've never listed a single job in our organization. Here's another why. The job market looks better for people with higher education degrees than it did when I graduated in 2008, 2009 timeframe, when we were in the middle of the economic recession, and I was coming out of an internship, and my boss said, I don't know if we will offer jobs to anyone, any of the interns, so we don't even know if we'll have jobs. Most of those people that I interned with who even took jobs were laid off, in the next 5 years because of economic downturns. Today, that looks better, but the reality is that we've got, in some fields, a buyer's market. So it really is about who you know and your skill sets, rather than just your skill sets. The other reason for this professional relationship building is because your plans will evolve. So many of you may have known since you were a toddler what you wanted to be or do when you grow up. But the reality is that for most of us, even if you do think you know or are on the track to do something that you know that you want to do, your plans can change. I started out as a marketing major, went through, got a corporate marketing internship, accepted a corporate marketing job, got a part-time job at the university to help pay off my student debt, and ended up here a decade later. I had no plans to pursue a career in economic development, nor did I have any idea what it was at the time. It was a part-time job to, fill the need, but what that bit of, a faculty member saying, hey, I know that you need a part-time job, and this organization over here that you have no idea, I've never heard of before, is hiring, that connection to someone that I knew, who connected me to somebody that they knew, created an opportunity. All the people then that I met through that part-time job turned into a full-time job that turned into a career. I like this little cartoon, or I guess you could call it. It's from The Godfather. It says, it's the guy that dropped off the donuts 2 years ago looking for business. What should I tell him? And so really, we've talked about it is who you know, but some doors simply cannot be opened without a strong introduction or a foot in the door. So whether you're looking for a job, a client, a collaborator, a partner, networking can be the door to your next opportunity. Now to the real deal. How many of you, when you think about networking, you think of this? A bunch of people in suits standing around in a room with a glass of wine. Well, here's the myth that can be busted today. It isn't a separate thing, and it doesn't have to involve wine, although sometimes that helps. It's not a new phenomenon, and it's not all about Facebook. It's really about having good interpersonal skills. It's about professional relationship building, having empathy, an ability to listen, and an ability to follow up. So even if you're the kind of person who recoils at the idea of small talk in the break room, these are the things that you can actually practice and get better at over time. So that might take forcing yourself to talk to a few strangers, but you can't get better if you don't practice. It's also not just for work. So professional relationship building is a skill that can come in handy for day-to-day life. So my fun, not necessarily professional, but networking and relationship building story is the time that I went to a garage sale at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning, at the time that my husband and I were house hunting. And we go to a garage sale thinking we're going to find some stuff to fill our future house. And we went to a house, and my husband says, "Is the house for sale too?" And the owner said, "It could be." And a year later, we were under contract for that house. That is, we didn't know it at the time, was our dream house in our dream neighborhood at the right price. And it never went on the market. Now, that house, they'd probably still be living in that house. Maybe that house would have gone up for sale in the next 5 years, and someone would have snatched it up, and there would have been a bidding war, and if we would have seen it, we would have overpaid for it. But the reality was, it just took the right thing, the right, kind of communication and relationship building at the right time to turn an opportunity into something really tangible for us. Now, again, it happens anywhere, everywhere, with anyone, and any language, really. These are just some of my personal photos of different networking type events and things. So the one in the middle, the gentleman is named Masa. I met him in Japan in March. My husband and I were traveling together, and we had a friend of a friend who had a friend in Japan. And we were thinking, we should probably find someone we know to help, kind of like maybe take us out for a authentic Japanese meal, or just show us around Tokyo a little bit. Turns out this gentleman works for a new scholarship program that the Japanese government funds to send college students, to universities and companies all over the world to sort of broaden the horizons of and diversify the Japanese population. Well, after those conversations, they're now going to be sending a student to Kansas State University to work in the College of Vet Med for 9 months next spring. So what starts out as a one-off kind of, hey, somebody who knows somebody, can turn into real professional opportunities for you. The other ones, one is a local photography group that actually has an online presence that gets together and meets up and is a way for my hobby to have a professional networking component. Others are this one here with the purple tablecloth is a professional networking environment that we create for certain specific faculty groups on campus to encourage interdisciplinary collaboration, but there's focused topics and interactions. Not everybody wears suits to those. There's also a potential online component to this. So we said it's not all about Facebook, but it can be if that's your best mode of communication. So for social media, really, building a professional network via social media I think, really relies on you getting out what you put into it. So it's about activity on these sorts of platforms. So I think the two most professional social networks are LinkedIn and Twitter. So for LinkedIn, there's an ability to add context to your network, identify who people in the industry are that you might, or in the academia, or wherever route you're going, need where they are and who they are. You can access and post relevant news and engage that audience as they post. There's many groups on LinkedIn for your specific niche. So if you're if you're looking for a computer science association or a animal science association, many of those have a LinkedIn presence, and you can join and stay kind of attuned to what more of the big industry news in some of those spaces, and then participate in those conversations. And so for those, people there's a growing niche of people who are very involved in that platform and follow up with it, read it. And so if you're on it and read, yeah, you get information about where the industry is going, so you can have relevant conversations with other professionals in that space. But if you are posting or commenting, that's where you start to have interactions that people might actually touch you and say, hey, Mr. Tom posted really relevant stuff. He's thinking thoughtfully about this, or shared a publication or interesting news that I actually want to then reach out to this person. Otherwise, you're in the background of those conversations. For Twitter, Twitter is a much shorter, easier version of LinkedIn in many respects that you can, many conferences these days do live tweeting where the entire sort of audience can be at the same time posting nuggets from the conference or photos based on what they're gleaning. And oftentimes then those people can be setting the story for what happened at that conference or in the industry, and that's where you can tell who's working with who, where might industry or university leadership be in these spaces, and where you might want to tap into folks. For LinkedIn, here's a number of kind of tidbits in terms of developing your own presence. So so LinkedIn is very different than a resume in that there's a lot of elements that you would never put on a resume that you would put on LinkedIn because of the social aspect. The first one is your photo. So on LinkedIn, you don't want to be the person with the I don't even know what the no photo people look like, if it's a head or something. On Twitter, it's a bird. So you want to be the person, you want to have a professional photo. It doesn't have to be a formal photo, although I think that helps in terms of establishing yourself as a professional in that space. If you are an employee of the university as a GRA or GTA, you can always go to the Department of Communication, Division of Communications and Marketing. They do their walk-in Wednesdays to do headshots. So while you're here as a student, it would be a good opportunity to get a professional headshot taken in a studio. If you don't have that opportunity or want just to have a professional photo, you want to make sure that your photo is appropriate. You don't have your friends or family or a Miller Lite can or anything else that you wouldn't want a prospective employer or collaborator to see on your page. The next thing would be to, unlike a resume, you can include more information about your experience, and you can really own that experience. So where you might have on a resume, try to keep it to a page or two, you can really expand a bit more on LinkedIn to include more information about that experience. You can also include more information about your successes and not just your responsibilities. So there's opportunities to include short vignettes on LinkedIn that you couldn't ever include on a resume. You can also on LinkedIn have references. So while you're here as a student, there may be a faculty member that you're working with or collaborating with, or other colleagues at other universities that you can have fill out a little snippet resume to say, this person, Rebecca, was a great researcher. She was diligent. She got it on time. She was an excellent writer. Really helped to advance the research in this space that can really add a lot of credibility for you in that space. You can also gain credibility and credit by association. So if you're members of your national associations or others, to have, reflect that membership and join those groups on LinkedIn so that it's that people who look at your profile can see that you're engaged in that specific in that industry. And then finally, I'll show you on the next slide, there's a bar that kind of shows how complete your profile is. And there's a certain threshold that you need to have your industry and location, an up-to-date position with a description, 2 past descriptions, your education and your skills, and a photo, and at least 50 connections. So what that will do for you is there's many searches that you won't even pop up on if you don't have a full profile or a complete profile. So there's a certain amount of information that is the bar that you have to get over in order for you to be a credible person on LinkedIn. So and then the other thing I would say is as you're filling out your profile, if someone is going to be searching on LinkedIn for people in that space, say a specific person with your specific research capabilities, they're going to be looking for those specific, say, keywords in your field. And so those are things similar to a resume, and similar to anything on the internet. It's all keyword searched. So those are critical points to ensure that you've got whatever matters to your field on that profile. Here's a quick snapshot of mine. So I'm not sure what it is that I still need to get my last bar to get like fully advanced. I think they just do that to you, so you keep adding more information. But as you can see here, you want to be at least over halfway on that bar so that you can be considered a fully complete profile. Another thing that LinkedIn does, they allow you to send 15 free one-to-one messages to fellow group members a month. So say you're a member of a computer science association, and you want to reach out to a potential colleague or employer. There is a limit on the number you can send, but you can have more of those if you're a member of the same groups. So you can get access to people that you may not normally be able to message because of they don't want you to spam a bunch of people on that site. Again, this is a snapshot of the walk-in, the photo services from DCM. Those are from the July and August dates, but I think they're every week or so that they have the portrait days. Another way to build your network right now is using your student card. So when you're building your network, right now you have one of the most valuable tools in your toolbox, and that's basically your student ID, the fact that you're a student. So there's many people in academia or in industry that are willing to speak to students because they are trying to build a talent pipeline for the future. So you're not working for a competitive company right now, so there's less risk for them to meet with you or to engage with you. So there doesn't have to be pressure or expectations in going in to ask someone for a meeting. So for instance, you can go in and be one of the easiest things to do is for informational interviews. So this is one where you ask the questions instead of a collaborator, partner, company. So you might do that to get a sense of what an organization is like, what it would be like to work there, what do they do, what are they looking for in talent, to see if you might be a good fit for that organization, and then a lot of times from those, if you ask for information, they might end up with, hey, this was a really thoughtful person who seems really competent. We actually have an internship opening or a new position opening, and that's when the conversation changes to an opportunity rather than just information. From there, there's also ways, if you're doing things like internships, during that internship, maybe you're working for one department, but use that opportunity to go learn about other departments or other, faculty member at your university if you're doing, say, a postdoc at a university. Maybe there's other folks that you might want to collaborate with institutionally, other faculty members, and departments. Clubs are another way. Volunteering. If there are conferences, especially industry conferences or academic conferences that you are interested in attending, oftentimes there's a student discount. Sometimes it's even free if you volunteer. And those opportunities, even if you're working the name tag booth, so like the registration booth, when people come in, who do those people meet when they come? Everyone has to go through the name tag person. So you get a chance to interact with and everybody, and that might be the thing that you gave someone their name tag, then you went to the wine reception and you said, hey, you're a familiar face because you gave me your name tag. Now it's a little bit easier to talk to because they're not quite strangers. So those types of things, whether you're, helping with a workshop or helping to, anything at those types of events get you exposure at typically an affordable price to be able to get into an industry. We talked about social media, friends and family. A lot of people take for granted that they've got friends and family, and sometimes for the longest time I had no idea that my cousin was a vice president at one of the large aerospace companies in Wichita. No idea, because that's just something we didn't talk about at Christmas. It was all about how are your kids doing and what's new in town, not necessarily about what we do professionally that could change both of our careers and futures. Mentor programs, the university, I think, just expanded the mentor program that was just in the College of Business to institutional now. I think it's called K-State Connect maybe. That is a great opportunity to plug into the university's alumni and friend network to get either professional advice, shadowing. I participated in that program as a graduate student, as an MBA student, and ended up shadowing the CEO of the Hershey Company, went to Mumbai for a couple days, did a acquisition, and came home. So these are the types of things that, you don't get unless you participate in. You don't get unless you, go seek them out. And it was only because I had that student card that I was eligible for that program. As you think about your network, you might also be thinking, you've already got a network of people. The people around you might be part of your network, your colleagues, your friends, your family. The next thing you can think about is who you need in your network. And so there are different types of contacts who might have different types of information that you need or opportunities or skills that could benefit you. And so, if you're planning an academic career, you might need to find contacts, or find contacts within a university or academic realm. If you're talking about a specific industry, those might be different circles. And so, here are 3 different bubbles of ways you can think about building a network. There's people that you already know, your friends and families and employers. There's people who you don't know, so potential employers, so people in associations and friends of friends, and then people who know people, so chambers of commerce, volunteer organizations or clubs. And so one thing you might do for yourself in terms of a professional network is outline your existing network. Who do you already have, and who do you need to know, and how do you get to those people to build your network, to get what you're trying to get done? So whether that's a job, a collaborator, or just a general opportunity. And then when you get there, and you're in that, whether you're in the airport standing next to a random stranger, or in a wine reception, or in a meeting, I think oftentimes the scariest part for people is the beginning of that relationship. And it all starts with a conversation. And so these are just a few quick and easy ones that I think can be helpful just to start a conversation. Anything related to food is super easy. So, if you're at a reception, if you tried these stuffed mushrooms, they are delicious, and you can talk to anybody about that, unless they hate it and they're allergic, and then you can find out all about their allergy, and wherever that takes you. A non-controversial news topic, so typically anything with politics these days, I would avoid, because you don't know where that relationship is going to take you, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of it. So it could, if it's something about, this one was a couple months ago, did you see Roger Federer is still dominating tennis? He's now the oldest person in decades to win the Wimbledon, and he literally made his opponent cry yesterday. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, isn't going to offend a random stranger if you happen to bring it up in polite conversation, but could turn into, well, I don't know a dang thing about tennis, but I know a lot about football. Okay, who do you root for? These are the key here, as we talked about earlier, is the ability to listen and then respond, ask questions, be empathetic. Something funny is also helps to sometimes break the ice. So if it's something like, I'll be honest, the only person I know in here is the bartender, and I met him 2 minutes ago. Do you mind if I introduce myself? Or something simple, this room is really a lot nicer than it was 10 years ago when I was here in school. What do you think about it? So once you know people, once you get in, it's a little bit then easier as soon as you've broken that ice to say, okay, who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? What are you studying? What's your area of research? The thing about people in general is that our favorite word to hear is our own name. And the thing that we love to talk about the most is ourselves. So if you can ask people questions about themselves, that's where you start to build relationships. So if you're sharing the conversation, asking questions to get people to talk about themselves, that's where you might find where you can click with someone. And then when you find those connections, that's where a relationship is built. It's a conversation that leads to information, that leads to a relationship. And so if you're an academic, I think it's pretty easy for people to talk about what their own research is or what their own studies are, and that typically, if you're in the same field, can help provide a lot of gap bridging. A general curiosity about the other person's work or what they do often is what leads then to those kinds of relationships advancing. So this is a little bit of a repeat from what I just said, but say you get in there, you break that conversation open, you're standing there with somebody, and now what? The reality is it's all about being, just what I said, listening, being engaging, being curious, asking those kind of interesting questions about a person. It doesn't always have to be about business. It can be about small talk. It's sometimes the small connections that people have in common that tend to draw them, even if it's not necessarily that they're working on the exact same thing, but it's, hey, I know she's from Southwest Kansas too, and so was my mom, so there's something that we share that now makes me kind of want to talk to that person a little bit more, or continue to know them, or remember them in general. You might have 6 conversations in an evening or in a day at a conference, but after that, how many of those do you remember? It's probably the ones who had some other interesting things that you connected on. Sometimes it helps to, actually not sometimes, I think it always helps to bring a wingman or a wingwoman. So having multiple people there to hold a conversation, should a conversation die in those types of experiences, helps to, you have 3 people trying to be engaging rather than just 2. And then knowing when and how to talk about yourself. So if someone is trying to be engaging and ask you a bunch of questions, it's, I think, important to be conscious about that and also ask meaningful questions back rather than spend 30 minutes talking about what you did last summer. If you're attending conferences or interacting with industry, I think a business card makes a ton of sense. A resume or CV can also serve as a business card, and if you're a student still, I think it helps to have your graduation date on those. Since you all are students here, there's the easiest way to get this done now is to this website down here, which is the K-State Career Center's website. They've got a template, so all you have to do then is plug your information into that template. You can, after you submit, you can actually submit a request to K-State Copy Services, and it's about $9 for 100 business cards in black and white. So that is the easiest way never to talk to anyone again is if they don't have your contact information. And so having, for spending less than you would on a pizza, you can have, 100 opportunities to connect with people. All of that information, I think, is on that K-State Career Center website about how to submit it and then order it from Copy Services. And what those are going to be are a real professional, thick business card that will give you credibility for whomever you're talking to, whether it's an academic or an industry person. Sometimes a follow-up note, so a formal letter is appropriate, but oftentimes a quick email is very appropriate for those kinds of contacts that you meet that you want to just say, hey, it was good to connect with you, to reinforce a connection. If it's something that there is an immediate follow-up on, so like a potential job or a potential collaboration or something like that, it helps to go more into depth in that email so that they know who you are, why they need to remember you and stay in contact with you, and what you can do together in the future. So again, networking or professional relationship building is important, and it doesn't matter your career path or if you plan to be a stay-at-home parent someday. All of these skills can help you in your day-to-day life. So remember, it's never over. After you get a job, it's still not over. It doesn't always have immediate results. This is a long-term game. And a long-term, really we're talking about long-term opportunities here. It takes practice because most of us are not great at it at the beginning or sometimes ever. It's something that you can get better at with practice. The key is talking to everyone, even if they're selling stuff at a garage sale at 7 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes there are gatekeepers that are in between maybe who you want to talk to or who you want to engage with, and we need to make sure that we respect those people because the term gatekeeper exists for a reason. They're there to ensure that appropriate connections get made with whomever they're assisting, and so ensuring that you never know who's going to open your next door, and so successful people are not lucky. They work hard and they're very intentional about it. And so that's all I have. If any of you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm also happy to review your LinkedIn profile or have a practice networking conversation if you're scared to death of that. Thank you for your time today. Ah. Are you looking at companies in other states or? Okay, so if you're looking at specific states in particular, one thing that I did, I was on vacation or for a work conference or something in another state, and I reached out to, at the time it was a university that I was looking at doing a PhD program at, and was like, and so I sent notes to people then to say, hey, I'm going to be in town. Would love to meet up to hear more about what you do. I'm thinking about relocating to the area and would like to kind of know more about the area or more about your company or the, whatever space you're doing, sort of what the environment there is for, X field. Just this week, I had someone who came into my office saying, hey, I'm getting laid off from my job. Who else do you know in the community that might be hiring this type of person? And I gave her 5 names and said I would make introductions to those 5 companies for her while she was there. Well, and so I think generally if you go in and you're, it might take a few emails or LinkedIn messages or calls, even cold calls to some of those companies to say, hey, to find somebody who's willing, but I tend to think if you play the student card, they're going to be more likely to. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the direct, like, hey, I'm trying to get a job with you, is threatening to companies because they don't want to. They might say, okay, go to our web page and go through the normal portal because we don't know you. So the trick there is to create opportunities for them to know you apart from the interview process. So if it's like an informational interview sort of a thing, or a, hey, can I get coffee with you? Or can we do a Zoom thing so I can hear more about, I'm moving to the area and thinking about, that space, then it's less less of an expectation that they would offer you a job or interview you. Although it's likely that if they like you, then they'll, tell you, hey, you really should submit, your resume and apply for this job. And then when your resume comes through, they remember you as the guy who came and had coffee or the guy who did a Zoom interview because you were so interested in the space in that, in the state. The other thing I would say is if there's regional conferences or industry conferences that happen to be in that area. I know that's probably hard as a student, but again, there may be, if you reach out to like a conference organizer and say, hey, I'm a student from Kansas State looking to move to Washington, and is that the state?
I'm going to a conference in October in Washington.
Yep.
And that's where the companies, and the advice that you've given me is one of the things that my grandpa's told me as well, is to get in contact with them and say, hey, I'm coming to the area.
Yep.
I'd like to have lunch, or I'd like to meet up.
Yep. Your grandpa's a smart man. The other thing I would say is you might sit down, if you're looking at a specific community, sit down with our Chamber of Commerce and say, hey, I'm looking to relocate to the area. Who should I, do you have any contacts or companies that would be a good fit that are needing this kind of a talent? And those people, those companies are going to be their members. So they might have whoever the company contact is to say, hey, there's this, this small regional company or a startup company or a big company that, are our members that we can connect you with from a talent perspective. Yes?
Specific advice for international students? Very talented people here at K-State,
You know, this day and age is a little bit hard in the country. It's questionable right now. I would say find a company that sponsors visas. Check step one. A lot of universities are good for that because they have a lot of experience in that space. So I think in a lot of companies, for international students, larger companies tend to be more friendly and understanding of that process to help make it happen. I would say that in a lot of the industries, it's not necessarily a downside if somebody's an international student or not, so they're looking, in a lot of industries, they're just looking for talent. We have got, and it doesn't matter what country you come from, it matters how talented you are. And so the same would apply. I would say that in a lot of, if you're looking at a company in the US that, having strong language skills would be important. So if there's opportunities to practice in that industry or with your colleagues in that space, so that when you go, to an industry conference or something, you can feel confident in having conversations, building relationships, that's going to be critical. But largely, I think the same rules would apply in terms of what I would recommend. I would say not at all. So, today's sort of society is so internationally driven that type of an experience is actually very well regarded by employers and colleagues. So, having a global perspective is important. And having, working internationally or studying internationally and having those experiences and having those networks, those, when I say, professional networking, I'm not talking about your local network. I'm talking about your global network. It is because you can collaborate, with the internet and all of the communication tools that we have today. The broader, the better, I would say. And I would say in terms of time, that's, especially if you're talking about a few months, certainly you're going to have, over those 3 months, you're going to be building a really strong, deep network there. But that's not going to, in the long term, isn't going to detract from your long-term network here or anywhere else. So I think on LinkedIn, the same is true of, you can look at other people's profiles to see how completed they are. So somebody who hasn't taken you can use the same filtering that the algorithm uses. If somebody hasn't taken the time to, to put that information on LinkedIn, maybe they aren't, maybe that's a way for you to filter out who's appropriate and who's not. The other thing I would say is, it's a general sort of filtering process internally. Is how much do we have in common? Where might we be able to work together in the future? Maybe we have. When I say, when we talk about your network, it doesn't have to be like you all are my network now, and we have to talk once a week. That's not. There's varying. Just as in your day-to-day life, you have relationships of all kinds. And so it's really about making connections. And I think when you don't have to respond to all 100 messages, but use your own judgment in terms of, does this fit with where my world is and where I'm going, or is it interesting? Yeah. Well, so it depends, I think, on how you want that relationship to be. So if you think, hey, I'm studying right now as a student, but this could either be a future employer or collaborator. For a lot of my professional colleagues, I do see them once a year at conferences, but it might be that's where something like social media can be helpful, to connect with them on Twitter or connect with them on LinkedIn, so that you can see what's going on, and say your colleague then posts something about, we just purchased this new piece of equipment that's awesome. That's when you might have an opportunity to say, that's really cool. You know, how are you going to use it? Or, you know, what's the next phase of your research? Congratulations on the new publication or something that could be an opportunity to know kind of what's going on with their lives if they're not active on, say, like a social media. You know, maybe it's when you have things going on. So if you have, you know, if you're getting to a point in your academic career that it's like we got a publication or collaboration or a, you know, I'm working on my dissertation. Would you mind reviewing this piece that I think you would know a whole lot about? Or would you mind having a conversation with me? It's those types of things that might make sense for you to have a connection with them. If not, sometimes once a year is enough that you might run into them again the next year. And that's when they say, hey, I remember you from last year. You were here last year, right? And that's the one thing that connects you to. And so now you're best friends at the conference, your new conference best friend. And I have a lot of those that it was 1 year we were there, the next year we met again, and now we're colleagues, you know? And so those are the people that you go sit with at lunch and dinner and continue those conversations. And then you find, you know, and then when you're ready to, like, you know, call them to say, hey, I'm looking for jobs in this space, or I'm working on this kind of research, you know, are you interested in co-writing a grant with me? That they know who you are. But I would say generally just at first it's the, hey, remember who I am? Maybe 6 months later it's, hey, are you going to the next conference again? I look forward to seeing you there.
This may sound silly, but when people give business cards, is there a right or a wrong way to give a card? Because when I go
Yep.
to conferences, I've seen people give it face up, and some, I don't know why, but then slightly give it face down. Is there a right or a wrong way to do that?
In the US, I don't think there is a right or wrong way, as long as you don't like tear it in half in front of someone. In many Asian cultures, though, it is different. So there's this kind of process. You hand it to someone with two hands, you take it with two hands, and you read it and look at it and sort of like study it. I don't know other cultures if there is the same kind of process. I do know, though, many Asian cultures have that sort of process. In the US, you might be across the table and throwing it. You might hand it to somebody. You could, fan them out and give everybody in the crowd one. I don't think there's any rules as long as you don't spit or step on it or rip it in half. Treat it as you would that person. We'll just say that. No other questions? Thank you all for coming.